Well, very good and good morning, everyone. Once again, we are on week 3 in our series of workshops to further your skills on entrepreneurship. And today we are talking about vision and strategy. So, how to go about that vision that you have for your particular project or for that venture or side hustle that you have been developing to one approach that is more strategic and not basically on tap and play or on your everyday, right? It's understanding your journey, the strengths that so far you have been able to develop, and the pathway to become successful at what you're doing, right? Not that you are not, is actually to further succeed in what you're implementing. And with that, we get started with understanding or reviewing our why, our who, and our how, right? So, for those of you that are familiar with the principles of entrepreneurship or somehow have grasped some of the terminology, same with design thinking, we always emphasize the fact that everything that we know, everything that we do, everything that we aim has a why, right? Why do I attend college? Why do I like a particular trade? Why do I feel this way, right? It's always around the why. So every time that we launch a venture, every time that we get obsessed about an idea, there is always a why behind it. And the why is the center of any potential project or any potential venture that you come along the way, right? That is the center of all. The who, it's more related as to who will you serve, whose pain will you cure, or whose pain will you treat. And the how, it's about how are we going to satisfy that need, cure that pain, offer a treatment, not in the short term, but actually moving forward. And that moving forward may be mid to long term, right? How is that vision that we have when we start creating as to we want to do this and continue to create other offerings, or we just see the creation of this particular solution and then we will see, right? It's about what's that vision that you have behind that idea or that need that you identify. And Angelina, if you don't mind me asking, since you're connected with us, why did you start your detailing business?
I started mainly because I had a huge passion for cars already. Um, and I had always had like very small businesses when I was really little. And so I wanted to continue that because I've always loved business. Um, and with the amount of capital that I had, I already had most of the tools that I needed to even get started. So I just started with that field specifically.
All right, so you transform your passion into an opportunity, is what I'm hearing.
Exactly.
And that's a very good example. And I thank you for sharing that because that is very much the case of many of those that aim to become entrepreneurs or that decide to jump in, right, to entrepreneurship. You transform a passion into an opportunity to launch your venture, right? When we embrace entrepreneurship, normally either we embrace it because we have no other alternative but to get into it. Two, that we identify an opportunity or a pain that we can satisfy or treat with an idea that we see, that we feel that will answer to their needs of others, not our needs, but the needs of a broader group. Or C, we have a way to think and to analyze that brings us to a drawing board of disruptive, innovative ideas that may potentially solve the issues of many in the future, right? And so in this case, Angelina went with her gut feelings, with her passions, and with the capital that she had, which normally doesn't take much to really go on and get it done, but is actually to know what is needed, right? And so I will invite you all, and I will be sharing alongside this presentation and recording a YouTube video on a TED Talk from Simon Sinek, which is about the golden circle. And the way that Simon addresses the golden circle is through the why, the who, and the how, but explaining exactly, or it correlates with something that Angelina shared with us, right? Where are your feelings and where are your passions? And what is your capacity to identify those needs and opportunities within the society, community that you live in? And if you really are understanding what are the needs of others to come up with a feasible solution to their needs, right? So we continue as to knowing your value proposition, right? So, what is your value proposition? Your value proposition is that particular thing that makes you unique, that differentiates you from anyone else that may be in the industry offering a similar or relatable product or service to the one that you're offering, or B, is what makes you unique, innovative, and disruptive, and positions you in market, right? So Angelina, if I was to ask you what is the value proposition for your venture, I know that is car detailing, right? So we know that there are multiple services out there that provide car detailing. We know that this venture was born out of your passions, but if I was to ask you what makes you unique today, what will you say that makes your service unique?
I know it's not more so like the service that I provide. I know it is, I don't know if this would count, but because I am a female in the industry, that does set me apart from a lot of the other competition. Um, and so females tend to, at least in this industry, be a little bit more careful with their attention to detail. And so that's more so how I sell my customers. I really pay attention to every single detail and I take more of a nurturing care to their personal cars.
All right. So if we were working, let's say, with Angelina's venture, right? She brought up that she's a female-owned business. She brought up her attention to detail. And if we were to transform this into something that made the business unique, and if we were crafting the value proposition, right? That is not the purpose of the webinar today, but using her example, which is a valuable example, we will say, as a female owned, right, car detailing business, we specialize in customizing services, right? So you tailor your services to your current clientele or your future clientele, right? And customizing the services will provide you the opportunity to offer and be creative in the ways that you offer services that your competitors do not, right? It sets you apart, the fact that you are a female-owned business, but regardless of that positioning, right, which is a unique and an advantage, is also your set of expertise, right? What makes you strong, and what makes you strong, right, to your point, is your attention to details that could be basically translated into customizing the services, which nowadays is something that many clients look for. in order to satisfy their needs where others don't have the space to do, right? Maybe your focus is not at the volume of cars that you service in a day or a week, is about how many do you service, meet their needs by customizing. That actually will lead into longer and stronger relationships, right? So moving forward, that help us reflect as to if I am looking to work on an entrepreneurship project, right? If I'm looking to compete, or if I have a side hustle that I want to further scale, right? Or simply if I am just trying to learn about entrepreneurship and I aim to be at a corporate job, right? But how do I position myself that I have my unique value proposition, right? That I can support with facts that will help me stand out from everyone else competing for that role. Or if I am in that job already, what makes me unique and what helps me stand and rise above others with my set of skills that can further my growth within that institution, and that I become an intrapreneur within the institution that I work on, right? We should all evaluate those routes, right? And when we move forward, we need to understand what are the weaknesses, the strengths, the opportunities, the threats by doing so, right? So if we think as to the traditional model, right? A traditional model of entrepreneurship is a model that it's not necessarily the e-commerce today, the one that is more based into digital. This is your traditional venture, if I think of it that way, and if I think of myself, right, as an entrepreneur, what are the things that I should be considering? So I should consider my strengths, right? Uh, Things that my business does well, or things that I as an individual do well. And I want to highlight this because some of others have some masteries, right? And out of your masteries, you can potentially basically build a consulting business, an advisory business, or a coaching business, and you become that unit, right? You become that transactional, or that frame where you will know the things that you do well, right? The qualities that separate you from your competitors, right? And that's very much tied in with your unique value proposition, right? Or your viable proposition. What separates me from my competitors? And what separates me or my company or my business from my competitors need to be fact driven, right? It needs to be factual. I When I'm talking about what separates me from my competitors or my unique value proposition, we never talk about pricing, and we never talk about the good or the bad of our competitors. It's about very much factual, punctual things that make that difference on you as an individual or your business. The internal resources, such as skilled, knowledgeable staff, right? Or the network that you have that supports what you offer. The tangible assets, if there is intellectual property, capital property, technologies, applications, software in place. What are considered weaknesses? Things that your company lacks, or skills or knowledge that you lack if you're offering coaching or consulting, right? That they represent, and this is very important for me to emphasize, weaknesses become opportunities, right? Weaknesses become opportunities, and if you work on your weaknesses, they turn into opportunities, and opportunities turn into business. Remember that. things that your competitors do better than you, that you know that you need to master or that you need to work on, or C, you realize that that's not an area where you want to actually work on, and then you strengthen those that you're strong at. The resources limitation and an unclear unique selling proposition. And this is very important because as I said, your unique value proposition is factual, right? Your unique selling proposition comes from your value proposition and from your strengths, right? And in that experience that you have built in that particular topic or industry. Therefore, it needs to be as clear as possible. Your opportunities. What markets remain underserved for specific products or services that you find a niche or a gap that you can actually service? The few competitors in your area, the emerging need for the products and services that you have, and the press or media coverage of your company, right? And nowadays we talk about who is influencing across digital that could potentially elevate the footprint of everything that you do in traditional media or traditional marketing. What are the threats? Emerging competitors, changing regulatory environment. And this is very important because it's not only about regulatory environment, right? By governmental policies, we get impacted, right? And by more or less sourcing, we get impacted in things that we do. Negative press, negative word of mouth, negative marketing, negative reviews will be a threat to your business, and changing customer attitudes towards your company. In other words, your customers feeling that they are not satisfied will become, excuse me, a threat to your business. Questions or comments before I move to the next one? All right, let's continue. Now, when we are dealing with a business that it is throughout what we will call the gig economy, or it is more of an e-commerce format, right? Or even through social media, we need to relate to Garrett's e-commerce SWOT analysis. And this is somewhat different from our traditional model because when we are talking about e-commerce, other players come to fact that it's not that they are not important in traditional business, but they become more so the bread and butter to the execution and success of e-commerce, right? So when we look at the strengths, we look at same day delivery within the city that we are in, or the speedy delivery to the items that we promise, right? Or the service that we promise. And I will give you an example. If you go today to Amazon, if you're Prime, more or less, you will get your item within the next 24 hours to 48 hours, right? If you do e-commerce with Walmart.com, you can get it same day, you can get it next day, or up to 72 hours, right? But there is a guarantee as to when will you receive your items. Urban Care has under 1 hour delivery expectancy. That works pretty much for those food and beverage businesses, particularly those that use either delivery themselves, DoorDash, Uber Eats, or any other platform to have delivery of their goods. The quality of the foods that are offered, right? It's not only that you deliver within an hour or within the period, is that they remain fresh and at the quality that was promised. Obviously, the amount of drivers, and in this case, we know that the model recently is about how many platforms do you use to reach your audience, and trust and high product sales exposure, right? Trusted and high product sales exposure. It's in what many channels have you been able to succeed, right? Because everyone nowadays goes to the reviews for the product and the how-tos. So what are some of the weaknesses? It is costly, right? Because you need to maintain yourself in multiple platforms. And through those platforms, you also need to have management of those platforms. If you have no monthly subscription options, then the payments scale and they become higher, right? At times, if you don't have a broader audience or you know how to manage your platforms in a way or strategize, is inaccessible to a larger consumer audience. And that's very important to know, right? When you start your business online, you need to understand that you're not going to build a platform or a community right away, right? That this takes time and it takes multiple efforts, tactics, and strategies to grow your audience and poorly optimize your search engine optimization tags, right? If we don't work well with the positioning within the fields or industry that we are looking into, or the ones that could potentialize what we offer, we are not relevant in any searches online, and we need to be mindful of that. So an e-commerce business is not only about the transactional or how good you describe or picture your items. It is also about how do I manage my networks and how do I manage my positioning and how do I manage my business analytics to be at the top search engine when they are looking for the goods or services that I provide. What are some of the opportunities? We can optimize mobile apps or the platforms where we are at for better responsiveness, and they could be built back or actually rebuilt or redesigned by the feedback that is provided, right? So when we talk later on about customer relationships are those that we have built first because we had an interaction with that group and we identified a need for that specific group. We designed for that group. We went back to that group. They tested what we designed. They provided us the feedback and they will be willing to buy our product or service because we listen to their needs, right? Well, they do the same, providing feedback to the platform because they will know whether it was easy or not to navigate the platform to get to what they needed. Attract a larger, wider target consumer audience, right? If we optimize well, if we design properly, and if we work in the complements of what we are designing, more likely we will actually attract a broader consumer audience. The search engine focus, right, can help us drive a greater amount of online traffic and improve our product sales, right? Our ranking and our metrics. And when we have an e-commerce business, metrics are extremely important. What are the threats? You can operate at a loss and drive away competition, right? Costly state laws to oversee grocery delivery and accountability under review and evaluation. What does that mean? We live in the state of Florida, right? We know that if we don't comply with the terms and conditions, if we run, let's say, a food business from our home, we run a risk, right? Because we are not meeting the regulations of the state. Also, if we are not actually overseeing the delivery and making sure that is within the claims that we make, we are actually jeopardizing our product, even though it doesn't have to do with the quality of the product. It has to do with the delivery component of it. Questions or comments? Let's continue. All right, so we now understand that we need to be clear about what is it that we offer, that we need to understand what do we encounter in our business environment, and what are our strengths, our opportunities, our threats, right? But why That is so important for me as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur, as an aspiring entrepreneur, or as an entrepreneur within the company that I aspire to work for or that I already work at, right? Because I need to understand the importance of efficiencies, right? And efficiencies are good and are essential because they allow us to save time. They allow us to dedicate time to things that really need that time for the business to have continuance, for the business to generate more revenue, for the ideation, research, and development of new items for many areas, right? And so when we talk about unlocking efficiencies, we need to identify our how. And remember earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that your how is how do you see yourself? How do you see your business? How do you see that invention progressing over a period of time, right? It's not in the now, is in a period of time. It is in a mid to longer term, right? And going back to our vision, we need to understand what are our current operations, right? Angelina, I will use your example. You mentioned that because you're a full-time student, you can only run your business on a part-time basis, right? So that means that you need to assess your current operations, right? You know that there is a, let's say, a transactional that today is not happening because you're investing in your knowledge moving forward, and it may be a limited resources business when it comes to humans helping you to provide the service that may have that limited time, right? And therefore I need to assess what will it take. One, if I want to offer services more days and more hours, or two, what would it take for me to grow my business, keeping it at the hours of service and days of services that I currently provide, right? Then I need to understand what things I'm doing that are taking too much time, that I can look into modern technologies that many of them are free today by subscription, that they provide a free aspect or a free side of them to actually simplify things that I do. That can be measuring my revenues, that could mean creating my flyers, right, for promotion. That may mean the management of my social media to engage with more people. Instead of me having to do everything, I could go back and use artificial intelligence to basically feed me content that will be very much relatable to the type of business that I am the type of client that I am targeting for my business, and that it minimizes the time that I invest in creating for me to manage my social media. I can streamline and standardize processes, for example, acquisition of inventory, the amount that or the time that it takes to detail a vehicle based on uh, time of delivery, time of pickup, more or less by service, what's the time window that it should take, how many times I post online about my business, how many times a year I may publish my services at a local newspaper with the Chamber of Commerce. How do I optimize my resource allocation, right? Do I need to get more helpers, or do I need to focus more about the equipment that I need to make the time more efficient, or a combination of the two? And that means that I need to work smarter, not harder. And let me make this disclaimer. Working smarter, not harder, doesn't mean that being an entrepreneur is any easier than to be an employee, right? An entrepreneur doesn't have a time to go in nor a time to clock out. You are an entrepreneur 24/7 because you're always thinking about what's your next thing, challenges, opportunities, situations that have rise in your business that you are constantly working on it because it's actually when you're investing your time, effort, energy, and knowledge to grow and move things forward. So, because you need to work smarter, not harder, there are, let's say, vehicles for you to get structured and organized. Whether you are an entrepreneur, aspiring entrepreneur, solopreneur, or aiming to become an intrapreneur in that job of your dreams, right? And for that, I personally recommend utilizing the OGSM, right? We have heard of SMART, but there is also something called OGSM, which I will explain shortly, right? That OGSM will help you get organized, structure, to strategize how will you do things more efficiently and smarter moving forward. So how does that look like, right? All right, so the OGSM, it's actually for objectives, goals, strategies, and measures, which is a strategic process, right, that will help you answer the following questions. Where are we going? What will it look like when we get there? How are we going to get there? And that's the question that I hear the most often. And how will we know when we are on track, right? This is done from mid management to senior management at leadership level, and this always gets cascaded down to everyone in the organization. And when we are entrepreneurs, this is your vision board. I call this the vision board of the entrepreneur. Why is that? Because it forces you to be intentional, to really think things through, and it actually forces you to execute, to take action, and that if something doesn't work the way that you projected it, or you were lacking research behind your idea, it will portray it and it will allow you to pivot and revisit those particular strategies or goals to best acclimate to the business that you want to build or the pathway that you want to build for yourself within that particular job or industry, right? This is a document that is a business roadmap. It allows you to set targets at all levels. It allows you to choose within the right strategies, but very important. You guys know that we started with the why, whom, and how, right? So this is very much embedded into the three W's. The who will do it, the what, by, and the when, right? It provides accountability. And you are accountable for your growth, for your success, for your career. You're accountable for your business, right? Questions or comments before we continue? All right. So how do we implement the OGSM? We implement the OGSM. Normally, they will talk about 4 steps. Personally, I talk about 5, and I will explain. First of all, you need to identify your business in the present, right? Angelina already has her business, so she's able to identify her business in the present. But others are in the ideation stage, right? So if I am on ideation stage and if I'm thinking of competing, where would this idea that I have a space, right? And will meet the needs of a particular population from my ideation stage. Then, if I identify those, I move to the next step. I need to create an objective. And let me explain something that I disclaim oftentimes and many at times don't seem to understand. Entrepreneurship is not equal to being a salesperson. Entrepreneurship equals of a visionary, creative, out of the box, go-getter, driven, and risk-taker approach. And so when we talk about the objective has nothing to do with the numerical value. The objective has to do with how do we want to be recognized? How do we want our business to be recognized? What is it that we want to achieve, right? On that vision that we establish. So I will give you an example on beauty. Many of you probably have heard of many beauty brands, right? And normally females are more geared to this than males, but let's use the example for L'Oreal. L'Oreal, as their objective is to become the number one beauty company in the world, right? And you would think, oh my God, but there are so many beauty companies nowadays, but they want to be the number one. They are not saying that they want to be the number one with their brand L'Oreal. They are saying, I want to be the number one cosmetics company in the world. And they are a conglomerate, right? And they have achieved that position. So now is keeping their position in market. That has always been their objective, right? And so once you set that objective, you need to set and align a number of goals, and the goals are measurable. The goals are number related. The goals are sales related to your objectives to elaborate on what you want to discuss. In other words, what steps will you be taking? What goals will you be achieving that will get you closer to that objective? Then we need to define the strategies that are relevant to meet your objective. The strategies are those things that you will put in place to achieve what you're saying that you want to achieve as a goal. And lastly, which is the step that I added, is set measures and define the action plan for each strategy. Your action plan, you can actually split it by quarter, by month, by semi-annual or annual. I do recommend by quarter. It gives you a more flexible approach, and it will also show you what you're trying to achieve, whether or not the timeline that you describe or set up is feasible or not, and if that really is a long-term or short-term goal, right? Questions or comments before we move forward? All right, let's do the next one. So just to recap, the OGSM components are the objective, which is the center of all. And once we have defined the center of all, we need to define our goals and our strategies, and we need to define how will we measure and who is responsible of taking that action and by when. And with that, I have an example, which is of a local pizzeria, right? And we all know that local shop, whether they do bagels, they do cookies, they do coffee, we all know that local shop that has a booming business with what they offer, right? And for them selling coffee or cookies or sandwiches for years, it doesn't mean that they don't aim to a scale, right? Some of them have the drive to scale, but there are internal circumstances and external factors that may restrict or limit their approach for growth, right? And so in this instance, we are going to take Tony's Pizzeria. Tony is a Small town center, right? Pizzeria. They have always focused on their pies and they are known, right, by their pies. That's the only item that they serve on the menu is basically pies. And they have decided that they want to expand, right? And that they come from Sicily and that they have the opportunity to offer more Italian cuisine, more Sicilian dishes. And that may mean that since normally you sell pies either to individuals, young fellows, and even families, you have an opportunity to capture a market specifically for families that are looking for that cozy space that makes them feel at home, that has good comfort, quality, fresh food, and that they can expand their offerings, right? They can expand their services, they can reutilize their space in a smarter way. And in order to do that, they have claimed as an objective that they aim to expand beyond their delicious pizzas to become a trusted Italian restaurant where families feel at home by offering enjoyable, freshly cooked Italian meals, right? So they want to be known as a reputable, good, fresh food Italian restaurant. And to do so, they have claimed several objectives. I'm sorry, they have claimed several goals, right? Because they define their objective. And I want to share some of the goals, right? They have established that their sales should reach $50,000 monthly, 50% of sales from non-pizza items, which means that their core business has always been pizza. So they are now expecting for 50% of their sales not to be pizza, but the new offerings on the menu. And I would like to highlight that when we work with consumer goods, right? And when we work with hospitality and food and beverage, normally, or the norm is 80-20, right? When you have innovation or when you're launching a new item. In other words, 80% of your sales continue to come in from your traditional items or business, and 20% comes in from the innovation and new items. So this plan is already aggressive as it is, right? And I highlight this because it may be an item that when you do your first quarter revision, you might have to adjust, or you become so successful that you become a good case study, right? 30% awareness in the tri-state area. So that means that within the state, they have three different cities, counties, or so forth that are very popular, that are within a decent distance, that people commute to have a good, decent, freshly Italian meal. 70% will be repeated customers, 80% will indicate that they are family friendly and homely, 80% will recognize the high quality, 90% of customers will enjoy the meals, and less than 1% will return the dishes. You guys know that when you go to a restaurant, if by any reason there is an issue with your plate, right, with your dish, you will ask your server to actually take your plate and to make sure that you get delivered what you were asking, or you simply didn't like what you were served, right? So they are aiming for less than 1%. But when you look at these percentages, 30% awareness, 70% repeated customers, 80% indicating family friendly, those you can only measure through surveys, right? Because that the survey is what is going to give you that information, and it's not merely a numerical survey, right? This has some open-ended questions and true or false questions to be able to get to those percentages specifically, and you rely on your audience to complete those surveys in order to be able to measure, right? So that comes in as a unique goal, if we want to put it somehow, right? And then what are the strategies that they aim to implement? So they want to offer dishes for the entire family, right? looking to develop an authentic Italian menu. They are looking to source, right, their products for their dishes locally, right, from local growers, farmers, and other sources. They want to turn customers into guests, right? So they want to provide the look and feel and experience of an Italian trattoria. They want to hire and train qualified people to be able to adhere to Tony's values and portray those in the service and the quality of the product that they offer. And they want to make people in the tri-state aware of what they offer through smart strategic initiatives, right? But how can they measure that? Well, let's take a look. Their metrics are two-thirds of the non-pizza choices, at least 5 or more kids items order, at least 10 shareable appetizers order, and to offer at least 5 new items or seasonal items and 2 new wines or 2 seasonal wines. 80% of the customers recognizing the freshness by using 75% of local ingredients, aiming to reduce, and I'm disclaiming this, aiming to reduce 30% of the food cost, right? That is an aim. You need to understand the cost of buying not local versus the local to understand whether or not you're able to achieve that ambitious food cost. 80% of customers feel at home. That is actually more of an individual feel and perception, which you need to measure through survey. 50% customers comment on Italian feel, which again is about their feel, understanding, and experiences. 80% of the employees have 2 or more years of experience. 100% of employees are happy, feel like family. That is really actually difficult to measure because once again, this depends on surveys and this depends on a lot of work to be put behind to claim that you want 100% of your employees to be happy and 100 of employees can tell Tony's story. Yes, every employee should be able to tell the story because otherwise they don't understand what is the value that Tony's offers. That's for sure. Then more or less 5% of sales for local media and marketing. Normally, the average investment for consumer goods as you reach 70% of your distribution. In other words, you have now 70% of your targeted clientele. You invest 4% or less in media or marketing. So this looks a bit aggressive. 30% of people in the tri-state area know of Tony's. That's actually a pretty good claim. And above 500 Facebook shares and likes in a month. That is pretty much aggressive. We understand that families tend to be at Facebook, but it also depends on their demographics, right? It depends at their educational level. It depends on their generational box, if you want to call it that way, whether they are on TikTok, whether they are on Facebook or Instagram or any other platform. And how will they measure? They have detail as well as who is the caretaker and the timeliner. And I would love to share this example with you because it's a real example. It's a live example. And although I know that if you're connected to campus Wi-Fi, you're not able to access TikTok, if you can use the data on your devices or you are off campus, I invite you to search for Rachel Nieves and her business, which is Buddy's Coffee Shop. They are based in Williamsburg, and Williamsburg is in Brooklyn, New York. And she went viral last week, nowadays having close to 7 million views because she was vulnerable, right? She is a mom and pop shop, coffee shop in a suburb in Brooklyn who is predominantly Puerto Rican. She opened her coffee shop 4 years ago in the midst of pandemic, leaving her high-paying job because she didn't feel happy with what she was doing and she wanted to become an entrepreneur, something that was closer to her grassroots, and that was coffee. And she learned how to roast, how to actually pack, and how to basically brew and be innovative with coffee, building in this business that was successful, that has been sacrificing but successful the last 4 years. And she learned, as many of us have heard, about the rising or the increase in rents and in commercial spaces, that her rent in 8 months was going to duplicate, and that meant that she could not longer afford that rent after she has invested 4 years in her business, right? She was so heartbroken, so vulnerable, that she went on her phone, right, on her ride home, and she just poured out her heart about what was going on and about another female-owned business in her blog, going through the same thing, that they didn't know what they were going to do next or why not, and sharing her story from a good place. She wasn't aiming on a GoFundMe. She wasn't looking for donations. She just simply wanted to share how she felt, and she went viral to the point that Fox News, NBC News, and other relevant news outlets have visited her location, covered the story. But not only that, it created a global movement, not a nation movement, a global movement, because her video reached out the globe to people in London, in different areas of Europe, in Canada, Mexico, and other countries, saying, we are not able to make it there, but we want to invite our networks and those fellows that are within the United States to go and visit. And for the last 2 weeks, the lines have been nonstop in her business, where Joe Jonas actually visited her shop, did a whole video as to why it was important to support businesses in the community. And it has created a movement, right? Her intention was not to build a marketing campaign. Her intention was not to get the funding. It was simply genuine pouring out the heart and getting in touch with those that related to those feelings, right? Because of this effort, now she has connected with everyone that stands in the long lines to get into her business to support her. She personally is the one who greets them. Every day, she does a video sharing how the day went, thanking people, and explaining the challenges and the wins for the day. And why do I share this? Right? Because not everything has to be a cookie cutter. Not everything needs to be square to be successful, right? People need to understand your values. Businesses are built within and in values. Values are the foundation of businesses. Your values as an entrepreneur portrayed into your business. Your values as an individual portrayed in your career. And that's what she did. She shared her values, right? She shared her emotions, her vulnerability. Now we know that because of the spike that she was able to experience, she's working on finding a different location and supporting the other female business across the street from her to actually find a location as well where they can continue. And she is sourcing some of her products from that particular business, right? Businesses are embedded in the communities, those communities that understand their needs, their wants, the connections that they need. She built her business at a Puerto Rican community because she's Puerto Rican herself. She understood what Puerto Ricans miss from home. She understood what a good cafecito or a good coffee meant for them. And her signature item is a coquito latte, which coquito is rooted at the heart of Puerto Ricans' Christmas, right? She understood exactly what they aim, what they miss, what they wanted, and she delivered. And so that same community has gone out to support her. When you know your unique value proposition, when you're able to verbalize it, when you're able to speak from your heart, from your values, from your roots, your business becomes unique because you have defined well your value proposition. You know who you're servicing, right? That led into all these things that happen. And so when you look at Tony, Tony is betting on what he knew as a Sicilian, right? What he experienced as a Sicilian. Food for Sicilians is comfort, freshness, quality, not only for Sicilians, but for Italian culture. Therefore, that's what he's betting on. Now, we don't always know what are the correct metrics or why not. That's the reason why we need to strategize and map, right? And we learn from those strategies. And as we grow or as we face challenges, we need to seek out for help. And in your case, as a student, that's what we mentors are here for. Uh, your faculty of preference is there for you. There are groups that could help you with your ideas, right? But you need to sit down, be truthful to yourself and to that venture that you aim to start, and take the time to define the objectives, the goals, how you strategize and how will you measure. And you need to stay true to your accountability, right? Tony did his OGSM. Whether it had opportunity to be adjusted or no, that's the reasoning behind the timeline, right? Is for him to validate whether those objectives were the right ones and those strategies were the right ones or no. But everything starts by being disciplined, understanding your unique value proposition, understanding your values, right? And knowing who do you want to service. Tony wants to service family. Rachel wanted to service her Puerto Rican community in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, right? We need to have that clear, right? Angelina probably in the future may pivot and say, I want to service my females out there who don't have the time, who live a hectic life, who don't have a support system in making sure that they have their vehicles taken care of, right? That could be a possibility. But you need to clearly understand why, who, how, but you also need to understand why, when, and what. Without that, we cannot strategize to be successful, right? And the idea here is to turn your vision into actions that will turn into the growth, the scalability, or the positioning that you want for your business, for yourself, or for your idea. So, a few tips that I want to leave you with. Review your plan weekly, communicate your progress, revisit your strategy semi-annually, track your progress, and commit to your plan. And I cannot get tired of emphasizing to commit to your plan. If you commit to your plan, as many times as you revisit it, you will see opportunities instead of challenges, and the challenges will become opportunities, right? And with that, I close my presentation and I open for any questions or comments that may rise. Angelina, I will also like to hear, one or two key takeaways for you and your business or as an individual from today's presentation.
OGSM. I had only ever heard of SMART goals before. I had also heard of SMART since like I was in high school. I feel like they've been trying to teach us that since then. The other key takeaway I actually wrote it down. Hold on. I really like the chart that you showed about unlocking efficiency. I found it pretty interesting how you broke it down and it helped to really understand what each of the arrows was meaning.
That's very good, and I thank you for sharing that because that is actually what we aiming for. At times, we see or perceive things being too complex, and when they are broken down, right, by pieces or by parts, we realize that it's not as complex as it may seem. It's just understanding what each component means. And I love the fact that you brought up that we've been listening to being smart or using smart since high school because, yes, smart is not any different from OGSM, right? If I was to share what is the purpose of OGSM versus the smart, OGSM helps me narrow down my objective, right? But also break it into goals that could translate also into sales, right? When I talk about smart, I can talk about higher level strategies and actions. And when I'm talking about, for example, marketing strategies, digital strategies, a smart is a good, let's say, methodology to design the strategy and the actions to target my audience, right? So one relates more to efficiencies, sales, and operations. That will be the OGSM. And SMART will come across for every other action that supports that transactional in the business cycle. I hope that that makes it clear. And with that, if there are not any questions or comments, I will love to invite you to sign up for the upcoming webinars taking place the next few weeks as we are discussing different components of the business model canvas, but also essential skills that we need as entrepreneurs and individuals to move our interests forward. Also, I would like to invite you to sign up for the student entrepreneurship competition taking place at FIU, where we will be offering a grand prize. But in addition, the winners at FIU will earn the opportunity of competing in San Juan, Puerto Rico, with 5 different campuses of the University of Puerto Rico on an entrepreneurial journey leading to 3 major prizes. One as a grand prize, 2 as green or sustainable entrepreneurship, and the other digital, innovative, or disruptive projects. To participate, all you need to do is register, attend to our informational sessions taking place next week, and to connect, participate, or make sure that you work on the different webinars that we have offered, presentations, and templates to get you ready to compete. The competition will take place the first week of April. And with that, I thank you for connecting with us, and I look forward to see you next week. Our